It's been a while. It's been a while, and we were actually trying to recall the last time there was, how do I put this nicely? No pressure on the Huskers tomorrow. Literally no pressure. When's the last time Nebraska had the expectations haven't been this low for a game in a long time? I couldn't even say it now. It just is what it is. But that's also, there's the potential, okay, to shock the world. Okay, and everyone's going to want to punch me through the radio waves of the internet for just putting that out there in the universe. All right, I'm not predicting that. I am taking Ohio State to win. I'm going to take Nebraska to cover. I believe the point spread is still 25. So my prediction for Ohio State, Nebraska is Ohio State 38, Nebraska 14, which is a 24-point differential. So technically they would cover. But there's an opportunity for Nebraska, and I will say you never know what's going to happen. Vanderbilt did beat Alabama, but Vanderbilt's a ranked team now. They're not typical Vanderbilt. All right, just as an example, they're one of two lost teams that are ranked right now. When you look at Ole Miss, which is a top 20 team, and then Vanderbilt has 2 losses, they're in the top 25, which is just interesting to me. But when you think about this Ohio State game, it's been a long time since expectations have unfortunately been this low going into a football game on Saturday. Jake and I were kind of chatting about it. When's the last time you could think of a similar feeling from a fan base going into a Husker game, Jake?
Well, obviously, a lot of situations are different, so it's hard to kind of think. But there's been pressure, I think, on all these games over the last several years. I will say this. 2021, of course, the best 3-9 team of all time. I did get into that game, Nebraska, Ohio State, and then they made it again. Nebraska only lost by 9. I got into that game for $10, an Ohio State Nebraska game. So,
did you make some money?
Huh?
Did you make some money?
No, I just bought it off the secondary website for $10. So that was I maybe could have bought more and tried to sell them, but that was my point. Is I think the hope on that day was pretty darn low. So I could probably go there. Maybe 2017. Ohio State. Remember by then Mike Riley was fired. They ended up losing 56-14. Definitely not a whole lot of hope going into that game. So again, you got to go with it. I think maybe an Ohio State type. We talked about earlier before the show. You know, I was going to ask you in your career but you know, your teams were too good. The only thing I could think of is maybe Oklahoma in the Bill Callahan year, but there's just in his first year, there's just not a whole lot of situations like this for Nebraska. And my goodness, I hope there's not a whole lot more to come.
I'm with you. And it's interesting because you did bring that game up to me before the show. I remember going into that game, and I don't remember thinking no hope or anything. I guess as a player, you view it differently. You view like you can win every game. And maybe the fan base felt differently that day, but I didn't feel like it that way. The final score is obviously 30-3, and we took, what was it, all 3 timeouts to try to kick the field goal to preserve the not being shutout streak, which is still going to this day.
That's right.
Shout out to Bill Callahan for using timeouts to kick a field goal and keep that streak going. All right, but that's also the game that afterwards Bo Pelini yelled at Bill Callahan, "You got my job," which was interesting because then Bo Pelini obviously came here, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. Had you ever heard that before?
I've not heard that before. I love to hear that.
I was walking off the field and heard some loudness, and it was a good old Bo, and those were the words I heard anyways. I was a little unhappy with the outcome of the game, but that's how I heard it anyways, but I digress. So when you're looking at this from Nebraska's perspective, in the offseason, Matt Rule talked about, okay, if you transport back to the offseason, and I'll kind of bring this back around to looking at this game currently from Nebraska's perspective as they head to Columbus. But if you go back to the offseason, Matt Rule talked about how they were better during the week than they were on Saturdays. He flat out said the team that showed up on Saturdays was not the same team as far as execution and playing well and practicing well. They did not take that. They did not transition it well to Saturdays, to the actual game day. And he mentioned that a lot of that has to do with guys basically, and I can kind of relate to this. Okay, guys kind of being afraid to mess up, and then all of a sudden you're trending on Twitter or you're trending here or there, and then the highlights played for the world to see. And I think if you're a fan, maybe that sounds really, really dumb potentially, but if you haven't been in that person's shoes, I get it. I mean, there were plays, especially in my NFL career, hey, I make a really good play, and all of a sudden, hey, that I've seen him on ESPN. I've seen bad plays that I was a part of on ESPN too. And then all of a sudden you got some analyst on Sunday morning while I'm eating, getting ready for the next game, playing a play from the previous game. And yeah, it's a good play that I liked and it went really well. And I'm like, yeah, keep replaying that. But all of a sudden, I remember one against Leonard Davis, who was listed at 340, which was lies. He was like 440, but I think he was realistically 380, 390 a guard. He hooked me on his own block and they ended up creasing it for a big run. And he just kept replaying that stupid play over and over. And I was like, oh my God, can you take it off? I could only imagine if there was like Twitter or Facebook back then, what that would have been like. Okay, so I can relate to a degree. Now, it's also part of it. It's part of the game. We had Dave Kennedy on earlier this week, my former strength coach in Nebraska. And I was a redshirt freshman. I was pretty much homesick my entire redshirt fall semester. And then I finally got to go home, spend some time with the fam. And I came back to Lincoln and I never looked back. I was never homesick again. Enjoyed going home for spring break, summer break, whenever the bowl game was over, back when we went to those year after year. But I was always ready to come back to Nebraska, ready to put the pads on, ready to hit the weight room, ready to do whatever was next on the docket based on what time of year it was. But there was a particular day in spring ball, my first ever spring practice, all right? And it was a Saturday, and I was beat up. I was with the 2 defense, and I was going against the ones every single day because one offense went against 2D, 1D went against 2 offense. In large part, not always. Sometimes 1 versus 1s would happen. In practice, the particular guy I was going against was Richie. And, man, we were just going to war every day, between the whistles, after the whistles, because, that's just how it was. And so this was a particular Saturday. It was a scrimmage. I had a bunch of friends. It was late in the spring who were going to a lake. And they were going to do things you do at a lake on a boat and have fun. And here I was getting ready to take on double teams. And I was a young man who hadn't quite matured. And I was still learning how this thing worked. And I did not have the best attitude. And we're in stretch lines. I didn't say a thing to anyone. I didn't say a word to anyone. And I just talked yesterday about how you could never question my effort. My hand went in the dirt. You could never question my effort. I didn't always feel like it. Most of the time I did. Probably 95% of the time I felt like it. But there were times when you don't. All right. We are humans. And this was a particular day that I spoke about the other day. And I was still learning the difference between motivation and discipline. All right. Motivation. Some people are more motivated than others. I'm very, very motivated, very easily motivated. But motivation varies from day to day every once in a while, no matter how motivated you are, because we're humans. All right. And that's where discipline kicks in. And this was the first day I really started to learn about where discipline kicks in, because the look I had on my face in stretch lines must have just been awful. I didn't say a thing to anyone about how I felt. I was just having a hard time getting going on this particular day. I was physically beat up. My friends, it's freaking spring and they're out doing what you do on a boat in a lake. And here I am getting ready to take on 1,000 double teams. And then after the play, is this guy going to try to hit me in the back for the 80th time? And then I got to fight him for the 90th time. And, I wasn't in a good headspace. AKA, I was a human being. Dave Kennedy walks up to me, not a large man. Okay. He would be the opposite of a large man. I say that with all due respect. He just starts like he gets like 1 inch from me, looking up at me, just starts laughing. And I'm like, I just stared at him like, what are you laughing about? He goes, football's hard. It ain't for everybody. And he just walks away. That's all he said to me. And that was the moment. It was like, yeah, this is different. There are things in this world that are different. There are things in this world that are easier. There are things in this world that are harder. And that was the moment where I started to understand the difference between motivation and discipline. And if I wanted to be good, it didn't matter what my buddies were doing. It didn't matter, that I was beat up and maybe I wasn't in the best mental mindset, and I didn't sleep that good the night before. It didn't matter. None of that mattered. All that mattered was what happened when I put my hand in the dirt. We were in the stadium, so in the turf. And I'll be honest with you, I still, to this day, that I've always felt like, I was going to share this with Coach K when we brought him on, and I forgot the other day. I always felt like that was, if not the turning point for me mentally when it came to football, that was absolutely a turning point. And I actually went out that day, and my dad, I never paid attention to the media. I never read anything. I didn't want to speak publicly back then. I just wanted to lift weights, do football, do college kid things, and stay the heck away from anything and anyone else that didn't have something to do with that. So I never knew what the media said. And my dad sent me the articles. It was my best scrimmage probably I'd ever had up to that point, absolutely, but probably my best scrimmage of the entire spring. And he sent me that, and he has kept those to this day. He's kept a lot of keepsakes. So I've actually seen him in recent years because every once in a while when they come to visit, he'll show them to me or something like, this is awesome. But I've seen these before. But my point is, like, that was the day it clicked for me. This, at the time, 40, 50-year-old man just laughing in my face, didn't even address anything, just said, football's hard, it's not for everybody, and walked away. But I knew what he meant. I knew why he said it. And it clicked for me, the difference between motivation and discipline. Where motivation drops off is where discipline kicks in. And I went out and I had my best scrimmage of that entire spring. And that's when I started to realize, yeah, this thing is hard. It's not for everybody. And if you fast forward to right now, looking ahead to Ohio State, and you think about what Rule said last offseason as well. Hey, this might get clipped. This might trend. This might go viral. And guys are a little bit nervous. When I spoke to the defense last spring, when Tony White was like, hey, can you come talk to these guys? It was an impromptu thing. I was just up in the football offices. Didn't even know I was going to see Tony. Just went to say hi to whoever the heck was there. They happened to be having a defensive team meeting or a defensive unit meeting. He's like, hey, can you come talk to him? I'm like, sure. What do you want me to talk to him about? He said, address that. The whole not worrying about what's said, not worrying about, trending or whatever. And so that's what I talked to him about. So for me, the reason I bring all that up, it's if you want to play football nowadays, it's part of the gig. They're also getting paid a whole lot more money. All right. It's part of the gig. People are going to treat you more and more like an adult because some of these kids are making more money than most adults make. That's part of the gig. They're bringing in money. They're bringing in revenue shares coming down the pike eventually in the next year or two in college sports as well. For right now, they pay kids money and call it NIL. So if I'm a current Nebraska player keep everything in mind that I just said, and I'm looking at Ohio State. Yeah, the expectations aren't too high. You know what that means? We got none to lose. It means we got none to lose. Like, people are like, oh, you lost 56-7 to Indiana. I mean, it might be worse than that to Ohio State. The point spread's 25.5. Like, oh my goodness. Like, there's probably going to be some fans who don't even want to tune in to watch. Hey, to each his own. I'm going to tune into every Husker game for the rest of my life till the day I die, whether I've got shows to talk about it or not. My twin daughter, one of my twin daughters, Desi, actually found a Husker song that I'd never heard before. I thought about playing it on the show today. I just don't know if Husker Nation's in the right mood. When Husker Nation's in the right mood, it was a rap song. It was quite catchy. All right. And I was like, man, this is pretty good. At some point, I want to play it on the station. It's got to match the vibe of the Husker fan base a little bit better than at the current moment. But that'll help if the team obviously plays better. But if I'm a Husker player, I'm looking at this game like I got nothing to lose. There's no expectations. And I'm just going to let it all hang out, lay it all out on the line. And there's nothing to lose. The only possible thing that could happen is we go out and we surprise people. What that means exactly, I don't know. What that looks like exactly, I don't know. I actually think Nebraska can keep it interesting for the first half. I actually think at least they better. I mean, my goodness, if you can't show up motivated right now, I think they're going to come out on fire, like motivation-wise. And I think they can keep it interesting for the first half. The second half, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen once the ball's kicked off. But kind of what I think is going to happen is that first half can be interesting. The second half, who knows what's going to happen there. Someone did point out to me Ohio State's coming off a bye. And the last game they played was Oregon. So they're probably still a little PO'd on their side. So that didn't make me feel better about things. But we're actually going to play 4 teams in a row: Indiana, Ohio State, USC, and UCLA. All right. UCLA is before USC. And we actually have 2 byes in there as well. But all 4 of them are coming straight off byes as we play them. So that's kind of interesting to me. Oh, man. If I'm a Nebraska player, I actually feel as free as I've ever felt to go play tomorrow. And that's how I would feel. Like, we have absolutely nothing to lose. If we lose 38-14, like that guy with that show named Adam Carriker says we're going to lose, hey, we've actually beat the spread. Not that that's success, not that that's your goal, but my point is, if that's where the expectations are, just cut it loose. Just let it go. If I'm Matt Rule, if I'm Marcus Satterfield, I mean, cut loose, man. If you got some trick plays, run them. Don't be uber predictable. Just put Harbor again and then run the trick play right away. Like, please don't do that because we did that versus Illinois and I think another game as well. Like, set them up appropriately. Like Black 41 flash reverse pass. They tossed it to Thunder multiple times, and then they put the receiver in motion multiple times, and all of a sudden they toss it to Thunder. He flips it to Mike, and he tosses it to Crouch for the touchdown versus Oklahoma, number 1 versus number 2 in 2001. But they didn't just come and run it right out the gate without setting it up. They actually 3 different times ran a play that looked exactly like it before they actually ran the Mike Stone's throwback pass to Eric Crouch. So let's set it up. Let's be smart, but cut it loose. You got nothing to lose. I mean, that's honestly how I feel.